Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
What is happening, y'all? Today I have the pleasure of having James Kennedy, who is the founder of Beach City Solar Consulting, and you're dialing in a very much warmer place right now, so I'm slightly jealous. I was just telling you when we were offline. Where are you dialing in from? Tell the people who are not seeing the bright smile that you got here shining us up, but you're in California. Where are you exactly in California?
Actually, I'm in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The majority of our business and projects take place in California.
Okay. That's so interesting that you said okay, because I did see that, but I was like, you did say Puerto Rico, so okay, interesting. So let's put that full circle, because originally we were literally just talking about offline and doing things out of state. So tell us a little bit about what you started out. You said in California. Now you're in are you also in? It seems like you're in New York, New Mexico. Tell us about the expansion of the business as the founder of, again, a much needed company, which we'll talk about how it's serving the people. Tell us about that expansion.
Sure. So my journey in solar energy started in 2015 in Hermosa Beach, California. It's a suburb of Los Angeles. If you've been to the South Bay, it's pretty laid back, a lot of surfers. It's an affluent community. But it's where a lot of professionals and families live that don't, may work in Los Angeles, but they're looking for a better quality of life, so they move to the beach. I was actually shooting pool at a bar, and I met an installer who worked for a general contractor. And in my previous career as a financial advisor, I had invested in some solar companies, and I knew the space was going to grow, but I didn't really know anything about projects or construction or really how any of it worked. So I took a meeting, and I worked for that company for a year and really learned the ins and outs of construction and solar energy. After that, I decided to go off on my own. I worked for another contractor for another year, and then went off on my own. Because I, much like you, I believe in education, and that this is a product in a business that sells itself when we do the right job of educating the consumer, the customer. So I wanted to take that to the marketplace, and one thing just led to another. I named the company Beach City Solar Consulting because I wanted to focus on our target market of up and down the California coast. And as all of this was happening, I came to Puerto Rico to visit a friend of mine who I worked with in finance about 15 years ago in New York City. And he had relocated to the island quite early. So there's some tax incentives to move your business here from the States or from any other country. And, I kind of looked at him as a model and said, we can do this too. So, the light bulb went off in my head, and, it's a similar climate to California. I'm a little bit closer to friends and family on the East Coast. I grew up in New Hampshire. I get to live the Caribbean lifestyle. So when I'm not working, I'm not hustling solar projects across the country. I go to the beach, I paddleboard, or I scuba dive, and get to enjoy the island.
Funny, we do have a mutual connection there as well. So I spent some time in Nashua, New Hampshire, as well, growing up. Not sure if you're familiar with Nashua.
Of course, right?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting connection. We're just saying how I'm dialing in from the good old Northeast, but I do want to bring it back to what you just said. It's interesting because there's so many. We have to give a shout out to the previous guest that came on as well, because very similar connection. It's kind of a weird thing. He had an Amazon business, and he actually, for that reason, we were talking about it because I have a team too, and we have folks in the Philippines, and we talk about having people in India and stuff like that, right? Outsourcing. But he actually moved, and it's funny. I'm trying to look up the name. It's Michael Begg. We'll give him a big shout out. But basically, he has an Amazon fulfillment Amazon business, and he relocated as well in Mexico. So I'm really curious to talk about the tax incentives as well, because I think that's another interesting topic. But going back to you, we'll get to that in a second. Going back to you, I love what you said, and it's so interesting how you position it, because it is, everything is. I always say this: people can't do business with you if they don't understand how you do your business. So our job is to educate people, is to educate others, so we can do business together. And I love how you said it's an education company. I even see that in your description. And then you went with the consulting, which was taking you back as maybe as a financial advisor. So let's bridge the gap. You educated yourself, you're a financial advisor. What was the spark? Were you seeing some growth? And maybe give some people some context as to maybe the time of the timeline when this was, when you saw maybe a rise in some of these energy companies, in that sector, so we have a little bit of context.
Yeah, that's such a good question, because that's really what happened. I graduated undergrad in 2004. And at that time, I had basically missed, the late '90s internet stock
.com boom. I know we all were like, damn, a little too young.
Yeah, just missed it by 4 or 5 years. I had friends doing really well in real estate and mortgages. Just missed that. And unfortunately, in my finance career, the timing was terrible. I was a financial advisor. The markets crashed around the world in 2008. I had just established myself in my practice in California with Merrill Lynch in Beverly Hills, I was working with at the time. And, I was struggling for a while, and that taught me so much. And I think in life, in business, we go through those things to become better. And sometimes you have to go through them to harden yourself. Diamonds form under pressure. So I saw, a market that at the time there was less than 1 million solar installations in the country. We've doubled that since then. And, the majority of those are in California. So, again, being at the right place at the right time and seeing other curves in other industries in the past, I knew that, I was ahead of the curve at this time, because it was still a little bit early. The cost of the equipment was still fairly cost prohibitive. It wasn't as commonplace as it is now. And now with the new administration, I mean, we're busier than ever. It's really just, we're seeing hockey stick growth, and I made the right call. It's been 6 years, but it was kind of having the experience from missing out to being able to recognize the opportunity and jump on it.
Can you, and I love hearing that, because I think it's also sometimes someone might be listening, might be like, okay, hindsight 2020, but it sounds you literally said you identified the opportunity. So what is the framework that you use, if there is one, or maybe some things that you pick up, right? Maybe not to overcomplicate things as far as, oh, here's the framework, but like, what were some things that you saw, man, that like were like, oh man, James, this is the right inch. Like, how does one if you're listening to this right now, how do I see opportunities around the corner? What are some of the common things or traits that you see? Is it the low cost? I know you touched on that a little bit. Is it that, how do you get a little bit of that insight that, I think this might be an opportunity?
Yeah, in our industry, you just hit the nail on the head. The cost was plummeting, right? So the cost of the hardware has come down by about 70% in the last 10 years. And I looked at things like, personal computers and cell phones and other technologies that have done that in the past. So I knew that if the cost was going to continue to come down, this was going to be an economical decision more than an environmental decision. It's obviously imperative that we get off of fossil fuels and transition to clean energy for the future of our planet and society. But people tend to make decisions with their wallet. So I knew, and at the time it was basically parity, right? You could rent your energy from the utility and pay $300 a month, or, if it's a business, $2,000 a month, whatever it is, or install a solar system. And it was basically break even. But having seen the costs come down and the technology get better, I knew that the future, it was going to be a win economically for the consumer. And I think anytime you can position yourself in an industry or with a product that is going to save consumers money, you're in a good place.
I love that. it all goes back to the marketplace, right? Like I love hearing that because we talk about, oh, it was passionate, or like, no, man, like listen to the marketplace. The marketplace is gonna tell you what's going on. And I think that's so important because I think we're in this era where people are like, hey man, like do what you're passionate about, do what you love. And it's like, yes, and what the marketplace needs, right? So I think you brought
Absolutely.
that home, and that's really important to see. And I think when I'm thinking of this, I can't stop. I don't know if you've been on a show where people aren't don't bring up the T word, the Tesla world. They're like, oh yeah, of course these guys like the Teslas and the real estate. So do you think it's the same while we're on this topic, James, that electric cars are starting to be like, you're starting to see all these companies, right? These sports companies are going to hybrid now, like a Porsches are like hybrids. Like, come on, man. That used to be like, electric cars weren't like in that category. Now we're seeing all these i8s. It's like it's a cool thing. So is that maybe for you? You kind of see that as well. Obviously, you're in the space, so you know that you said it. Fossil fuels is gonna need to have a serious. That industry is gonna need to take a serious look. But is that maybe like a similar comparison per se?
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely. I think we're in the very first inning in electric vehicles and energy storage, and we're going to see the same thing happen with those two markets that we've seen with solar panels. So costs are going to come down. It's going to be easier for the consumer, and it's a pretty easy decision when you're saving money and like you said, doing something that you're either passionate about or at the end of the day, morally is the right thing.
All right, so talk to me, man. You built a company and you're doing really well for yourself. Talk about the transition, and because we're on that note, we brought in passion. Let's just stick with it. At first, how do I even a person like you had an idea, which I love. That's the beauty of an entrepreneur. You have this idea, you get educated on it, and again, this is exactly why we actually have this podcast. It's the lab. You experiment, right? Which is the one thing we're very passionate about. So you get this insight. What's the first thing that you do? You get maybe knowledge. What was the next thing? Like, take us a step back. You've been in this space for like a good while now. Do you have that hindsight of like do you remember what the grind was like, man? Or
it's been a journey. I mean, they don't call it the solar coaster for nothing. So
there you go. Talk to me about that. What was that?
There's a lot of ups and downs. You have to have the perseverance to make it through, those valleys. There's always going to be peaks. There's always going to be valleys. And you just have to know that, like you said, this is an experiment and I'm going to learn from it one way or the other. So it's always going to be a win. Even if I fail, I'm going to get back up. I'm going to learn something. I'm going to apply that to the next attempt. And I'm going to find a way either over, under, or around the obstacle. So, I mean, there was a lot of challenges in the early years because the industry that I'm in inherently is construction. So you're dealing with people that are used to doing things in a very established industry in a very established way. A very good example of that is, door-to-door sales. Knocking on doors is what Tesla, formerly Solar City, was known for. And it gave a very bad impression on the industry. If you're in California or some of these other states on the West Coast 5 years ago, you typed in solar into Google, you would literally be harassed for the next 2 months. Every single day you get a phone call, you get ads coming up in your email or tracking you on social media. And I just didn't think that there was any need for that. Again, if you educate the consumer, they're able to make a decision that's in their own best interest. So why try to confuse them? Why try all of these marketing and sales tactics? Just keep it real, be honest, and people will respect that, and they'll affect the transaction through you because you provided that value. That's one of the big, reasons we've had the success that we have had is because we've taken a different approach. And now 5 or 6 years later, nobody in the industry is doing that. Now with COVID, everybody's doing everything remotely, which is another thing that I had positioned the company to do, partially out of need because I had moved from California to Puerto Rico.
That's very interesting. So I want to talk about the what's in it for you, right? Not you, like the person, the consumer, right? Because I think you talk about that a lot. And the only way I can get educated, and only way you get my attention, if you start educating me and I start figuring out that, hey, there might be something in this for me. Forget the guy who's selling it to me or the gal, right? It's about me. So what is the conversation that you're having at a high level with a consumer like me who does traditional, who has traditional energy, doesn't know anything about your company? What is the pitch? And again, forget the pitch. We'll throw that out because that's not what you're about. What is the education? What does that seminar even sound like, or that session one-on-one right now? What does it sound like so that we can understand? Okay, wow, that's what's in it for us as a listener.
Great question. So as a real estate investor and as a property owner, it's very simple. It's just like refinancing your mortgage is the best analogy, right? So there's, whether it's maybe not the best analogy because it's a different technology, but you're essentially taking a cost that you have on a monthly basis and you're reducing it. So whether it's your cell phone or your mortgage or any other fixed cost, you're switching providers. You're switching providers from fossil fuels to clean energy, and you have to invest in the equipment, whether you're a homeowner or a business owner or a large corporation, and you can finance the equipment or invest in it outright. But either way that you affect the transaction, you're going to save money.
Okay, so I like those two options, and I love how you went back to the basics, right? You didn't talk about, all right, so how it works technically, Ruben. You literally went back to the basics of like, hey, listen, I can save you more for your bottom line. I'm like, okay, cool. You got my attention. Let's sit down and talk about it, which I think is really important even from sales, from because that's what it is. It's educating of like why, like they talk about sales sometimes. It's like, it is your duty to serve me, to share this message with people, because or else you'd be doing them a disfavor if they didn't know about it. Like that's what sales is. So I love how you did that. So now that we've gotten there, my two options. You said investing upfront or financing. As an investor, you understand as well, I'm sure you don't get in the way of making that call, but what are you seeing that most people do, and maybe what's the best way to leverage? And then if they do finance it, do you have a third party company or maybe a sister company, or like how does that structure? We're very interested to hear about that, how you leverage that as a business model.
So I'm very glad you asked that question because it varies in every different market, right? I would say in our market along the California coast, it's about 50-50, whether it's financed or just a cash purchase. I think most large corporations are just buying the equipment outright because that's the quickest return on investment. But I'd say for most small to medium-sized businesses, the best option is to finance, because they can keep that cash flow going into, if you're in real estate like yourself, other properties, if it's your business, keep doubling down on your business. Obviously you're doing something well if you're succeeding and needing, solar panels in a large facility. So again, our role as consultants, my role when I'm consulting with a homeowner or a large corporation, is to just provide education and then give them options. So part of the process, of course, is the education, which, if it's a small project on a house, it's pretty straightforward, but there's still a high learning curve because there's a lot of moving pieces and it's a new technology. With the larger projects, again, there's more of a hand-holding process. And as consultants, we're on the same side of the table as the client, as the property owner. So we don't care how they affect the transaction. Our job is to package it in the most cost-effective manner and then let the client choose. So it really comes down to their individual situation. But we have relationships throughout the country with different installers, with different lenders, with different tax equity companies. We work with all different manufacturers. There's no, again, with my company, Beach City Solar Consulting, we're not pushing anything on our customers. It's education and it's kind of an a la carte. You choose what works best for you.
That's interesting. So I want to unwrap a few things because it's just really interesting. You talk about residential and commercial, and I know you've consulted hundreds of commercial residences, all which I want to talk about, and residential as well. So just so to our listeners, the difference between the two, I'm assuming that the commercial, the economies of scale, like it's larger, maybe lower cost, but I could be wrong. Uh, could you help us just understand again, maybe like a single family home as well, maybe like a 3 bedroom, 2 bedroom homes, like what one might be facing, and then at the same time, now we want to get into the real estate development. I'm really interested into hearing how that looks like at scale. So when we start with residentials first, like what does that look like for your average homeowner? Maybe it's vacation home rentals, maybe it's your own home, 2 units, duplex, triplex. What does that look like? What does that number look like, and what's best practice?
Sure, great question. So for an average homeowner on the two coasts, right, that's where electricity is the highest. So where you are in Boston, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, all very high costs of electricity. Same thing with California. Hawaii has the highest cost of electricity in the country, and not shockingly, they have the highest solar penetration. So again, this has been something that has been driven by economics primarily. Now we're seeing with climate change and these terrible wildfires and hurricanes, the need for the storage part of the project. So now there's a sustainability need, which the marketplace is meeting because the cost is coming down on the batteries as well. So what I would recommend for most homeowners, if it's owner occupied, is to go with a solar system to offset their annual energy usage, and then also install a battery for when the grid is down. Typically, you're looking at a 5 to 7 year return on investment in those markets. If you invest in the project up front, there is a one-time 26% federal tax credit against the project. You can also finance and basically save 20 to 30% with nothing out of pocket. So it's really a no-brainer.
Yeah, and when you say that, just so we understand the ROI, right? 6 to 7 years. Like, help us understand, is that literally paid off? Like what the initial investment? Like, are we talking about? And again, I know maybe we'll get into this because some people sell the energy back. I don't know if that's something you want to get into. I'm sure you got a smile on your face, so that means this is a gem right here that we just unpacked. So let's just go with the ROI thing first, so we understand. Okay, you talk about reducing my bill. Are you talking about like I've reduced it so much over 6 to 7 years that it's paid off, or like what are we talking about? Just to put things into perspective.
Sure. So as you know, ROI, return on investment, is a financial calculation of when you're going to break even on your invested capital. So for example, let's say you invest $30,000 in the solar system. In year one, you're going to get that 26% tax credit back. I don't know what that number is off the top of my head, but it's, I think, $7,000-8,000. So,
yep.
That size solar system is going to offset roughly, depending upon your market and how much the utility is charging you, about $300 a month. So you're saving $3,600 a year. So you divide your savings by your net investment, and that's your payback period. So once that payback period has been met, every year that you're in the home, you're saving $3,600. And that doesn't even factor in, that most utilities around the country are raising rates in the high single digits, if not double digits.
Very interesting. So I think that helps put things into perspective. Now, there's obviously a lot of fancy tools that we can use. I'm not even going to get into the whole cost segregation thing because we'd have to get somebody else on the show to talk about that, and get your team to look into that. But let's talk about the commercial, because that was a really good example of residential. I think people would resonate with that. Now, if you're maybe real estate developers listening to this, and one of the things you had talked about, James, is okay, how we've done things a certain way, right? So at what point does a team like you come into the picture, or even get invited to the table? Is that when someone's like, is that at the early development stages? You also talked about a few layers that I want to unpack. You talked about different manufacturers and all that. Like, can you help us paint the picture of how you would work on a bigger project? Maybe that's a development project, And then we can talk about as well maybe an existing kind of, there's already, let's say, multifamily, because some of our listeners are have multifamily units. Might give them some insights of how this can actually be kind of inserted into their existing ecosystem.
Sure. Great questions. I love commercial projects because it's the same education process with a bigger payoff. So
You heard it. Say it one more time, James. You got to let the people know, man. Bigger payoff. Now you got my attention. What's up?
Exactly. So, in business and as entrepreneurs, we have a limited amount of time, right? There's only 24 hours in the day. We want to maximize that time. I'm passionate about helping anyone get off the grid and go solar and save money and help the planet. But of course, we're able to have a bigger impact with larger projects. So one example right now, I brokered 3 solar projects for Skechers in Southern California. So they are adding 3 facilities to their corporate headquarters. This is a town that I was, very involved in when I was living there, and I knew some people in the community that put me in touch with the decision makers in the company. And of course, the development process took quite some time. It took actually, I think, about 3.5 years from when I met the vice president of commercial development to them signing a contract. So
talk about the process.
You go back to perseverance and having to, have faith in the process. Exactly. Trust the process. So they basically used me as a broker to provide multiple bids for the project. They knew they were going to go solar. They knew it made financial sense. Their executive team had already signed off on it. And they said, James, we don't know this industry. We know you're an expert in this industry. We know you have the relationships in the industry. Go out and get us 2 bids. So I did that, and they went through the selection process and chose who they wanted to move forward with. So
can you take a step back on that so we don't lose track? And I'm very curious about it. In your world, because B-City Solar Consulting, or is it that you're, when it comes to install, when it comes to manufacture, is that all outsourced and you guys are just kind of fostering the relationship? When you say broker
Correct.
the deal, is
Correct.
that what that means?
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
That's awesome. So it's hands off.
Hands off, just like a real estate transaction. Our job is to guide the client through the transaction, through the process. So we have these relationships with different install partners throughout the country. Depending upon what the project looks like, we will recommend a certain installer. And part of that process is knowing the equipment, knowing the marketplace, knowing the different lenders to bring to the table to make the deal happen, making sure that the numbers pencil. Look, as a real estate investor, you're not going to get involved in a deal unless the numbers pencil. So that's our role. And if any of your listeners are looking for that type of value add, I would encourage them to give us a shout.
Absolutely. Okay, so that transition into the business model, which I think you touched on it, but it's really important for us to really just touch on. You talked about you're already prepared for a COVID-like environment for your business to thrive, which is, very refreshing to hear. When we hear that, did you see around the corner? Who knows? But all I know is that you design a business that, because again, the demand, you talked about how you're currently in Mexico, so you need to be able to function with the other states as well. Can you talk to us about your systems that you have in place? This is more for the entrepreneur who's listening. I mean, you built a company and you're doing consulting and you have these third-party relationships. I mean, shoot, what went in first? What did it look like in the beginning? And what does it look like now that you're able to do all this remotely? I mean, it's remarkable. And I tip my hat to you for that. That's amazing.
Thank you. Again, it's been a process, and, get in the lab. The first step in the process is to try, right? So
you said it. He said, get in the lab. He said it.
When I was in California, of course, it was, more hands-on and more face-to-face, and I was able to be there and develop relationships. But, when I moved here and moved the business here a little over 2 years ago, obviously that changed. And like you said, using technology, leveraging technology has been paramount, whether it's Zoom or CRMs like Pipedrive. I use, a lot of different software programs to be able to broadcast our message, whether it's via social media or just things as simple as screen recording. There's so many different things and resources out there. You just have to be open to using them and trying them. And I'm no tech expert. I'm probably the last guy in the room to adopt new technology. But I knew I had to get out of my comfort zone. I knew I wasn't going to be able to be in the room and meet that decision maker at XYZ company and pitch him on going solar. So networking through LinkedIn, networking within the industry, asking for introductions from people that I trust. If there's a new project in a market that I haven't worked in, getting that trusted, introduction is paramount. And just, being open to, you never know where opportunities are going to come from, right? You wake up in the morning and hopefully in your inbox or LinkedIn or Instagram or, a combination of all of those, if you're putting out your message, you're going to get good feedback. Where that leads is really up to the individual and the company.
I love that, because that reminds me of the compound effect by Darren Hardy, right? Which you may or may not be familiar with, but you're an embodiment of that. As you put in the work, you put in the bricks, and you're stacking up, you're building that momentum, and essentially, to your point, you're putting it out there, you're putting enough of that energy out there that now it comes full circle as well. It's not overnight, which is refreshing to hear. I'm very curious though, from an operational level. So, and you're very clear. Was it always when you started the company? Was it the angle always to be the consulting angle, or how did that come about? Because I feel like maybe something needed to come before then that maybe we're missing as far as the ingredients in the lab. Come on, tell us the truth. Tell us the juice. Give us the juice, man. What was the first thing? Were you boots on the ground guy first, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna be a consultant? How did you kind of transition?
Yeah, of course. You gotta learn the industry. You gotta learn the trade, right? So for me, never having worked a day in construction, everything was new. I mean, it's all new terminology, all new, a whole new process, permits, managing labor, what actually electrically needs to be done to the property to facilitate the transaction. It was all, and I credit the first general contractor I worked for. He was great in being my mentor, and always being responsive. Always, I'd be at a site and take pictures and send it back to him, and he'd advise me and kind of walk me through the process. You got to start with the crawling, right, before you can walk, long before you can run. And that was me learning the business so that in the future I could become remote. For me, having a background in education, marketing, and sales in a different industry, it made a lot of sense to transition to this because it's the same skills, just working with people, educating, numbers, just applied in a different industry. So I always enjoyed this part of the business. I never really wanted to manage labor or have those headaches. However, there's a trade-off, right? Our margins are not as sexy as the installation companies because they have to manage that part of the business, and they have to take on a little bit more risk, and those things are priced into the projects. But I think it's a really good mix because a lot of construction companies or solar companies, solar installers, are terrible at this side of the business.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of companies go out of business because they're throwing millions of dollars into call centers or online marketing or other things that consumers really in the marketplace have said, we just are not interested in this. We want to be educated on our own and make our own decision. We're just looking for an unbiased educational resource. And again, I saw that need in the marketplace 6 years ago, and we continue to capitalize on it.
That's awesome. One thing I'm, as you can see, I'm writing down notes because we're in a lab. I always show this because we're always taking notes for you guys, right? This is what we do. We're practitioners. And one of the things we talked about earlier was the team building. And one thing I just want to tie in together, just because I think what you're giving us is an education on the concept itself of energy, saving energy in the grid, etc. But at the same time, we want to understand the business model. And as far as your business model goes, when we talk about making that initial contact, you talk about networking a lot. What does the workflow look like? Are you literally making strategic partnerships at the high level before the project even starts, or like how do you insert yourself in? Is it because we also know the door-to-door people, right, which we talked about, and I'm assuming that's not what you're doing. So how do you get 80% of the customers that you get in simple? And that is the simple question I want to ask.
Referrals.
Gotcha.
If you take care of your customers, they will refer you. It's as simple as that.
Awesome. Now, as far as the team goes, you talk about expanding. You have a team in Mexico, etc. How large is the team? Like, what are we looking at? Because I know I want to get to tax advantages and or the benefits, or as far as outsourcing. So, you want to tell us a little bit about that part of the world, the reason maybe why you even moved out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the team is small. There's only three of us. We got up to six about a year and a half ago, and I am not a great manager. I've always been an owner operator, and again, going back to scaling, my focus has been on developing larger corporate projects.
Mm-hmm.
So although those take more time and investment, there's a need for it, and the payoff is bigger. So it was very hard for me to motivate our team, our sales reps, to execute at the level that I was expecting. I don't know. I mean, this is just me being completely transparent. I don't know if I'm a bad manager, a poor leader, if the incentives weren't there. I did structure things to incentivize them. In our industry, we work off of commission, and the ability was there to make twice that of what the normal is in the industry. But of course, you've got to work your butt off, right? And for me, I think it takes a certain type of character to want that upside and take on the downside. Most people that aren't entrepreneurs are going to go for that $70,000 a year safe job with less upside, right? I was offering twice that with all the downside. So it takes a certain type of person, and that's totally okay. That's something that I learned about myself. That's something I had to learn about the business and how I wanted to get clear on how I wanted to scale things. So, we work in all the different marketplaces. We do residential throughout California. We'll do commercial throughout the country. But, I am very clear on the number of projects I want to get involved in every year, what my time is worth, and, how I want to continue to scale from here.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please.
No, I would say it's really important that as the visionary, I think we hear that all the time, that having that idea of where you want to go and kind of lead from behind as well. Because if you don't have the vision, no one else is. We can't follow vision that's not there. So it's refreshing to hear. And it sounds like you're still in the growing phases. I'd love to hear more about like what's next, because I could just see so many opportunities for you and your team. I do want to pivot into the insider secrets. Talk about something relevant that happened recently. We can't have you on the show and not ask an expert like you. We saw what happened in Texas. As far as kind of having, you talked about having like a backup plan, or being off the grid. At what capacity could one or residents, or again, you enlighten me here, because this is your scope of expertise when it comes to like generators and things like that. But in this case, when it comes to solar, how long do you think that would have been able to help folks out in that situation? Is it a couple days? Is it, like how can one live off of just solar energy for quite some time? Like, can you give us some context so we understand where we're at with the technology?
Probably the best question yet. And it's so important. Like you said, the entire state of Texas just didn't have electricity for, a couple of weeks. It was terrible. So the same thing happened there that happened here after Hurricane Maria, where, the electricity grid was down for months on end. That was one of the reasons I initially wanted to move the company here, was to help penetrate the market and have more adoption. And, we're at a point in 2021 with the technology that should not be happening anywhere in the world. And of course, in developed countries and economies, we're ahead of underdeveloped, but the ability is there. So as long as the solar system and the storage system is sized properly, you can run whatever you need off of it into perpetuity. As long as you're getting access to sun, you're good.
Does it work like a bank, like over time, or is it one of those things that, like, does it also leverage existing, like, or is it just independently operates on its own when it comes to solar energies, just so the listeners understand, and including myself?
Sure. This is going to get a little technical. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. But basically, there's two types. There's really three types of energy systems on the marketplace today. That includes solar. So you can have a standard grid-tied solar system, which sits on top of your roof, whether it's your home or your business. And when the grid goes down, you lose electricity. So this is good for property owners that want to save money. If you are concerned about being able to work when the grid is down, or power your manufacturing facility, or whatever it may be, you need to add the batteries. So batteries have essentially taken place of generators. They're obviously cleaner. On a cost comparison basis, they're pretty similar. But with solar and batteries, you're able to store the solar energy for when the grid goes down. There's a number of other functions. I'm not going to get into that are of economic value. But the third type of solar and storage system is completely off grid, where, let's say you're building a house out in the country, and then you just say, hey, screw it, I don't even want to connect to the grid. You can be completely off grid with this technology. Our company only works with the first two options.
And do we think that the third option is is that something that we're going to see again, the cost go down? Because it sounds like it's one of the most expensive out of the three. Would I be correct?
Yeah, it is. It's right now, it doesn't hurt to have the grid as a backup. So you can generate your own electricity, store it, deploy it. But depending upon where you are in the country or even the world, there are times, when you have extreme weather and you may not get the generation that you're looking for from your solar system. And it's nice to have that backup. So
like a hybrid. It's like a hybrid car, right?
Exactly. Yep.
It's interesting. All right, I appreciate that, because I think that I think that's where we're at. You're talking about educating. It's like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to connect the dots, and now I can kind of tap into your world more. So I think what you've taught us today is important, just getting educated on the benefits, understanding the scope, and then pulling trigger as investors or as practitioners or experimenters. Look, transitioning into the last segment here, brought to you by Invested Talent, our sister company, social media. We got to ask you the question. You talked about it, and we're not going to let it slip through the cracks. How important has social media been for you in your business?
It's fundamental. When I was first starting out in Southern California, every project I would go to, I would take pictures and post them. And over time, people knew that I was the guy to talk to in the community if they wanted to go solar.
It's key. Branding 101. So that's good. And you got your branding colors down pat too as well. So I see you shining over there. Listen, I always say that you're a reflection of your business. So real quick, I just want to tap into your world real quick. Is there a favorite book out there that you have that you kind of resonate with, that kind of you always seem to tap back into?
Wow, there's so many. It's hard to put one at the forefront. I try to read as much as possible, at least 2 or 3 books a month. There's so much. You can shortcut so much from learning from others, whether it's a podcast like this or through reading.
Your favorite book that kind of puts a stamp in your identity somehow, or no?
For me, besides personal growth and spiritual stuff, which I'm very much into, 10X by Grant Cardone was really big for me. A few years back, it was our second year in business, and we went from a couple 100,000 revenue to $1 million, and that still sticks with me today. And when I talk to other entrepreneurs, I always encourage them to read that book, because you can never do too much. And whatever you think it is, there's someone out there doing more, and the marketplace is gonna teach you a lesson. So, you can never, the best thing that happens on a weekly basis when we send out our newsletter is that people unsubscribe, because that means that they're seeing so much of our company that we've affected their subconscious. So
yeah. In the words of Grant, if you don't know me, I apologize. Right? I mean, shoot, you got to get it out there, man. No, that's why I'm a 10X student of the game as well, and that's refreshing to hear. Good stuff. Now I know I should have opened up with that question. Be like, oh, okay, you're a 10X. I mean, come on. Welcome into the lab. No problem. That's what it's all about. So definitely tap into that. If you're the audience, we'll have that in the show notes. But yeah, that's a really good one. What's a best habit you think that helps you execute throughout the day?
There's a few. Phenomenal question. The thing that I've learned the most lately is being intentional. So being intentional with your time, being intentional with your projects, being intentional with your strategy. Like you said, always making sure you make time to plan out your day, to plan out your 30,000 foot view. Where is the ship going now? Where do I want it to go? How do I make it get there? That has really changed things, particularly this year.
Good. And I think speaking about being intentional, you came to the right place, the lab, to get your word out for the audience, to a large audience. They really help you, really get your messaging out, because you're in a business to educate. So good for you for doing that. Another last question here is software or any application that you feel has helped your business or even yourself operate at a higher level. Give us the juice.
Besides Zoom, which has been fundamental, again, paramount, Pipedrive. I love Pipedrive. It's a very simple CRM that you can visualize every day. You asked me, what one habit, my mornings, the self-care mornings, I go out, I meditate, I work out, then I get, the most important thing of the day is what I hit first, right? That's when you have the most energy. So, looking at that sales pipeline, seeing how I can move those projects forward. Pipedrive has been awesome, and I highly recommend it to other entrepreneurs.
We sure will do. If you're driving, make sure you keep your hands on the wheel. We'll make sure we'll have that in the show notes. And again, lastly, where can the people find out more about what you are up to and your company, Beach City Solar Consulting? Obviously, I like the branding of that name there. That's why I thought you were California. I automatically thought California, but no, you are expanding, and I mean, you are in multiple states, and who knows, you might be expanding. Maybe I'm just foreshadowing it. But how can the people find out more about what you and your company is doing?
Our website is our best resource. It was just completely revamped. www.beachcitiessolarconsulting.com. I have an educational blog on there. You can also sign up for our newsletter and get a free copy of my ebook, Solar Energy Secrets for Homeowners. If If you're looking for a proposal, it's as simple as entering a utility bill, a picture of your electrical panel and your roof, and you'll have that within a day. We are also on Instagram at Beach Cities Solar Consulting and Facebook Beach Cities Solar Consulting.
Absolutely. We'll make sure you give you guys a shout. Matter of fact, I'm gonna, because this is what we do here in the lab. I gotta give you a shout out. My man is in the building. We'll make sure that we do that. Tag all the social media as well. Definitely follow what James and his team are doing. I think it's remarkable. I love your angle. I love how flexible the business model is, and I love the impact that you're having in the community. So we'll definitely have to circle back to see how all these wonderful experiments have flourished and help other individuals nationwide, so, and internationally, actually. So on that note, just like that, we appreciate it, James, and just like that, we are out.